Before playing Path of Exile 2, I was a real PoE noob. I played Path of Exile 1 on and off, but I could never make it that far. I would get to maps, but I couldn't figure out how to get the currency to get the gear I needed to keep pushing, so I would just quit. This time around, through a more trade-focused approach, I was able to make a couple thousand divines in my first month of playing. Here are the trade filter mechanics that I use to get filthy rich, and you can too. I really don't want to waste your time, so if you feel like you have a good understanding of this left side of the trade filter and only want to hear the most important part, you can just skip this section and go straight to the weighted sum section. But I do go over some small optimizations and cool little things you can do, so if you're interested or are a beginner, definitely stay around for this. With that being said, let's get right into it. This part of the filter has a couple of uses. 99% of the time, I will only come here to adjust the item category. Say I'm looking for a high DPS bow, I can just come here and filter by bows, so that when I start filtering by the good stuff later, I can only see bows. For item rarity, I'll usually just leave it as is, but if I'm looking for really sick bases to greater essence spam, then I'll definitely turn it on magic. These bases would usually look something like this. Item level can be incredibly useful, since certain affix tiers can only drop at certain item levels. For example, if you're trying to get +4 or +5 to lightning skills on a wand base, then you need to make sure the wand is the right item level for that. In this case, it has to be at least eye level 81. Item quality doesn't matter, since the trade site itself has a function that will always tell you what the stats of the items at max quality will be. For equipment filters, this one is super straightforward. I personally have only used these sections, but they all work the same. These little boxes here just let you determine the min or max rolls you want on the stats to the left. If you're looking for a 350 DPS bow, then go ahead and just put 350 here at the minimum. Or if you're looking for a high ES chest piece, put in the amount of ES you want right here. The empty rune sockets theoretically could be super useful if you're trying to rune flip, which I'll get into in my next video, but in practice, it's kind of coded in a janky way. It only shows items that actually have a socket that is empty, but it won't show items that aren't socketed, but can be socketed with Artificer's Orbs. The level section is really useful if you are low level or are leveling an account. If you put your level on the max section, only gear that you're actually high enough level to use will be shown. And the attribute section is exactly the same. Just plug your max attributes in, and it'll only show you gear you can wear. I played Spark Mage, so I would normally set my strength and dex to 1. Waystone filters. My first playthrough, I never had enough of the correct tier of waystones, so this was a godsend. But I will say that any offer below 1x, like these, will almost never have a real person willing to sell. Truthfully, there are probably a lot of uses to some of the stuff that I'm unaware of, but I generally only use this section to put corrupted to no, so the gear is uncorrupted. This just means that 1, you could corrupt the gear yourself for potentially god tier implicits, or 2, that you could actually be able to craft onto the gear, like slamming Exalt Orbs or adding runes or qualitying it up, which you can't do on corrupted items. And the last part of this section is the trade filter. Remember earlier when I said we only really want to buy waystones that are 1 exalted or higher? Well, you can do that right here by setting the currency to exalted and the minimum to 1. That brings us to the stat filter, which is the real meat and potatoes of the trade filter. At a basic level, I think everyone knows that it lets you search for specific affixes on items, but how exactly we do that is the crucial part. Let's just try to think about belts for an example. For the sake of simplicity, let's just say the only stats we care about are 1, resistances, and 2, life. But here's where it gets really interesting. Life is really simple because all we need to do is filter for life. We can set it to a minimum of 100, 150, doesn't really matter. It all depends on how important life is to you or how rich you are. When it comes to resistances, what do? Maybe at the start, we just do 20 minimum to each resistance, right? This is 60 resistances total. But what if there's a belt with like 40 fire res and 40 lightning res, but no cold res? Even though it has a total of 20 higher resistances, our filter would miss it completely. This is where the weighted sum comes in.
This right here is my favorite thing ever. In the history of forever. I think about this every day. I think about this all night long.
And this is the true moneymaker for a hideout warrior like myself. It essentially lets you weight each stat for a fixed value and do totals based off those values. So for this belt, we can just weight each resistance as 1, and then say we want a total weighted sum of 60. This is just saying, hey trade site, 1 fire resistance is equal to 1, 1 cold resistance is equal to 1, and 1 lightning resistance is also equal to 1. Now go find me 60 total, I don't care how you do it. After doing that, we can now see both the belts with 20 fire, 20 cold, 20 lightning resistance, and the belts that have 40 fire res and 40 lightning res but no cold resistance. You can set up multiple filters as well. So to add life in the mix, we just add a normal filter for life and put, let's say, 100 life as the minimum. Now every item that returns after searching has to have a minimum of 100 life and 60 total resistances. The cool part is that you can actually tell this is working because at the bottom of each trade, it will tell you what the weighted sum is for the particular item right here. But truthfully, belts are the simplest example. For the OP shit, let's take a look at wands. But I have to say, get ready because this is some real nerd shit. Wands, unlike belts, don't just want 2 or 3 stats. They actually want all of these affixes. They're not by any means equal in value, but they're all stats that give a significant level of value. But the problem with the normal filter is that it requires each stat to be on the item, so it's impossible for us to fit all of these affixes. Think about this. Extra fire damage is definitely a mid-roll, and percentage spell damage is definitely a high roll. But is 30% extra fire damage worth more than like 10% spell damage? Definitely. So why wouldn't we include it in the value of our search? Well, the weighted filter is the answer to all of these problems. With it, we can create something like this. We can assign any valuable stat a weight based off of how much we think each stat is worth. So then when we search, we will find an item that has any combination of these stats. As you increase the minimum weight up here, the minimum total amount of these stats increases, and as a result, the total power level of this wand will increase proportionally. But we can go one step deeper here by doing a double weighted sum. Say we really only care about 2 stats. This can happen for a lot of rare items, but it happens almost every time you want to buy a magic base. For example, say I want to shop a really good magic bow to craft the highest possible DPS I can. Magic items can have a maximum of 2 affixes, 1 prefix and 1 suffix. And if we look here at bows, these are the prefixes and suffixes we can find. We are going to want to have any combination of these prefixes with any combination of these suffixes. So we put these prefixes up here in the first weighted sum, and these suffixes down here in the second weighted sum. We assign values to the weights based off of what we believe them to be worth, and then when we search, it'll only bring out bows that have a combination of the prefixes and suffixes we listed. For these bows, we would need to have done 6 separate normal searches for the same result. And for the wands from before, we would had to have done 792 normal searches to get the same amount of results. You can see how amazing weighted sum searches are when it comes to optimizing your trades on the trade site. This will save you an infinite amount of time when searching for your own personal gear, or make you so much currency when looking to trade for profit. At this point, you're probably thinking, how do we actually determine the weights for the weighted sums? This is a surprisingly complicated issue which I'll tackle in way more depth in my next video about pricing items. For now, just think of it like this. We make some assumptions, and then we test them until we find one that works. Like for the bows, I assume that the bonus physical damage was roughly equal to the percentage increased physical damage. The maximum for the average physical bonus damage is around 50, and the maximum for the percentage increased physical damage is 180. This means that each point of flat physical damage is worth 3.6 times the value of each point in percentage increased physical damage. So we give a weighting of 3.6 for flat physical, and 1 for percentage physical. And the cool thing is, if our initial assumption was wrong and flat physical is worth more or less, we just raise or lower the weight. For the total weighted sum, I settled on 80, because it meant I'd be getting a mid-roll or higher of either of these stats. If you're okay with getting a lower roll, you can lower this number. If you want a higher roll, you can increase this number. This is just going to be trial and error. I know it sounds like I barely passed 7th grade math, but trust me, this estimation is more than good enough to get us started. In fact, I've made over 200 divine utilizing this exact flawed calculation. And that is literally everything I know about weighted sums. Hopefully I still have a couple of you watching the video, and if I do, go ahead and give yourself a round of applause. But there's one more thing, active trading. This one is really simple, but super valuable and kind of ties everything together beautifully. Normal trade lets you search for posts that people have made in the past, and active trade lets you search for posts that people will make in the future and notify you when they do. Which explains how sometimes when you underprice something, you get spammed by like 30 people in a second. Take a look at these boots. I sold them for 1 divine, but I actually bought these for like 3x because I set up my active trade like this, and I was able to snatch them up the minute the seller put them in his stash tab. One thing to note is that you have to set a max value here. Otherwise, you'll be inundated with all of the overpriced items that will get posted. And that's it. Normally at this point, I like to give all the money I made during the video to the comments section. But I didn't make any money. In fact, I only really lost my sanity. So please like, comment, and subscribe to give me your energy to edit the next video on pricing gear.